Hello, and welcome to another episode of Moral Saurus. I'm here today with Dr. Paul Conway from the University of Southampton. Paul is a professor of moral psychology. Welcome, Paul.
Yes, hello. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Paul does a lot of work studying moral dilemmas, like these trolley dilemmas. And I'm wondering if you could explain, what is a trolley dilemma?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so the trolley dilemma is a famous philosophy thought problem that comes to us where there's a runaway trolley and it's going to run over 5 people, but you could instead change the direction of the trolley so it kills 1 person. So the question is, should you kill 1 person to save 5 lives? Right? And this is the opening to a broader set of questions of when is it acceptable to cause harm, and how do people consider the roles of actively hurting people versus achieving moral outcomes when they're making moral decisions.
Okay, and so in practice, what does this look like? What is a trolley problem?
Right, so I mean, sometimes people actually give people the trolley problem. They write down like, hey, there's this trolley that's going to kill 5 people. Would you, should you, or is it acceptable to change the trolley to kill 1 instead of 5? They also give other variants. There's famously the footbridge problem, where you could push a person off of a footbridge so their body stops the train, and thereby saving 5 lives. But both of these are frankly ridiculous. So in my lab, we never use the trolley problem or footbridge problem. We try to use somewhat more realistic scenarios, like what if you're in a motocross race and there's 5 people who are about to have a pile-up crash, but you could kick 1 person into a tree, prevent the crash. Should you do that? Sometimes there's medical dilemmas, like should you deliver a vaccine to some people to save many lives, but at the cost of other lives? So there's a number of different scenarios people are using. There's speedboats, there's lifeboats, there's plane crashes, there's all kinds of different scenarios that we ask people about, and we ask their opinion. Is this acceptable or right? Would you do it? And questions of that nature.
And what is the general finding?
Right, so people disagree. That's certainly step 1. People tend to systematically disagree over certain problems, so it's far more common for people to accept sacrificial harm for the trolley dilemma than the footbridge dilemma. The classic interpretation of this is that it's easier to hurt people when you're pushing a button and allowing the train to just do its thing, and it's harder when you have to physically use your muscles to push someone. Anything that gets you emotionally entangled in the harm that you're causing makes it more difficult to cause the harm. And I do think there's something to that, but there's also this question of people don't really believe that the body of a human can stop a train. And when they don't believe that, they're more likely to say, well, I'm not going to perform this action that I know is not going to be successful. More broadly speaking, there's this, originally this dual process model that assumes that when people feel this emotional aversion to causing harm, this motivates them to avoid causing harm. And when people are thinking carefully and logically about overall outcomes, then they're motivated to maximize outcomes, even if that involves causing harm. And there's been 20 years of debate over this. It's been in some ways thoroughly debunked, because there's a lot of evidence that shows this is way too simplistic and it's not exactly what's happening. But on the other hand, I like to say it's not so much incorrect as incomplete. I do buy that emotional aversion to causing harm and thinking about outcomes are 2 of many processes that people are using to resolve these kinds of dilemmas.
And so you talk about this aversion to causing harm.
Yeah.
To a dinosaur like me, this is quite puzzling. So tell me, what is it? Is it that the bodies would be so mutilated by the trolley that you couldn't eat them afterward?
I guess it's something that mammals feel that maybe reptiles don't, right? This desire to not hurt other people, at least of the same species, and anything cute and cuddly and warm. You know, some people extend out this feeling to everything on Earth or everything in the universe, right? This motive to not be a source of harm for the world.
But how would you eat?
It's true that when people need to eat, because we do eat meat as humans, at least many of us, people tamp down this feeling and try to avoid feeling this way so that they can view their food as just pure meat as opposed to a living thing that they have to hurt.
So most humans would not interview their meat?
Probably true. Yeah, most humans would not. But I do wonder now what you taste like.
Well, I don't think that's going to be happening, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, probably a little sake.
What is the process involved in these trolley dilemmas? How do you know what people are thinking?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot of work has been done. So the classic simple way to do this is you ask people one dilemma or a series of dilemmas, and you try to look at individual differences. It's like, oh, are people who are more emotional tending to answer one way, or people who are more logical, do they tend to do another answer? But more common, what people are doing is changing variants of the dilemmas that they have theorized to be a more emotionally involving or more logical variant, or changing circumstances under which people answer the dilemmas. They try to ramp up how vivid and emotional and personal it feels to cause this violence, or they try to interfere with the cognitive processing by inducing cognitive load or distracting people in some other way by giving them time pressure, those kinds of things. A lot of these manipulations are not so successful. There's a lot of mixed results in the field when it comes to trying to directly impact the online application of processes to these dilemmas, but a lot of the individual difference work is pretty systematic, pretty reliable. So we know, for example, people who tend to value cognition and tend to engage in more cognitive processing are reliably saying cause the harm to save lives. And people who tend to be more emotional and don't want to hurt people are reliably saying don't cause the harm even to save 5 lives. I couldn't bear that, to feel that.
I'm a pretty cognitive guy, but I tend to go on the side of eat them all because they're delicious humans. Speaking of which, I'm getting a little bit hungry. Yeah. Let's thank our guest, Dr. Paul Conway. And thanks, Paul. I'm looking forward to eating you.
Thanks, Moral Saurus, and I hope to be faster than you.
You will not be.
No.
Ah!